Um, so let's talk about Linux and the operating system. Um, Basically, for any system, there has to be the hardware, and the thing that runs the thing that runs on top of the hardware is what you refer to as the operating system. Or in Linux terms, it's usually the kernel, because the kernel is the part that communicates or interacts with the hardware. There are a lot of other applications that come bundled together with the operating system. But the parts that talks directly to the hardware is the kernel. The kernel is at the heart of any operating system. It interacts with the hardware, and it does all the tasks like memory management and scheduling and file system management and what have you. It's on top of that kernel that you have the shell, which is basically like for lack of a better way, the user interface, because that's an irony, because shell is actually not a UI, even though it's like the utility that you use to interact with with the kernel, and by extension interact directly with the hardware. Um, on top of that kernel, on top of the shell, is where you have your commands and utilities, where those commands and utilities are the where your application programs are installed, the utilities needed for you to operate your system efficiently. That's the level of abstraction they live on. Then you have your file system, your file system and directories, because in Unix everything is organized as a file, and we'll get into that in a bit more. So let's talk about the shell. Basically, the shell is the interface with which you communicate with your kernel. You'll usually see it as a black window, something like this. And for this, I'll just pop over to the shell. But before I do that, let me just talk about accessing the shell. To access the shell, assuming you have a Linux computer, when you start it, if there's no user interface, then you go directly to the shell. Um, on the shell, you'll notice that there is this part, AK at IS engineer -AK. This part is the user. Um, the next part after that is the host. Um, then after the double column, it's the location you're in. Can someone tell me what this tilde notation mean? Like this tilde before the $sign?
Home.
Yes, it's the home directory. Um, but first you definitely need to access your shells. So how do you access your shell? Assuming you're not using a local computer, that the Linux machine is not locally, it's not your local PC. You'll need to access that Linux machine. Um, let's pop over to my shell. You do that with SSH. So ideally, it's something like this: SSH root, or whatever user you're using, AK at box 172. 172.26.4180. I'm just forming this, but basically you use an SSH to get into your box. What is SSH? Um, way of users accessing a remote computer over the network using with SSH. You can log into almost any terminal, any box, any Linux machine that has SSH running and you have permissions for. So we could do that. But I think I'll just log into a random box I have access to. This thing is frozen. Okay.
Oh.
So basically, irrespective of what operating system you have, you can install shell on the operating system, and installing shell on, maybe if you're not using a Linux machine, installing shell on your Windows or your Mac would make it easier for you to actually like try to log into um, other remote computers over SSH. So let me SSH. So you can see, first of all, it'll check the fingerprint, and this is just like getting an encrypted ID of the machine, just to make sure that it's a secured connection. And only when you go ahead and say this is a secured connection will you try to now log in. So it's asking me for the password. I'll input that. And basically I've SSH. So you can see it's calling it, you can see the user has changed here. It was AK, while this is cube user, which is exactly what I used here. For the name of the host is actually given the host name as opposed to the IP I used here, and it's on the home directory. So I'll switch over to this. If this terminal works well, then we'll just continue with it. Yeah, okay. So we're logged in as root on the R and box, RAND box, at the location this. So what's this location? Um, this one Linux command pwd. Pwd stands for print working directory. You can see we're on /root. /root is the location we're on. Like, so that's if you were to open. So imagine, for those that are not very familiar with Linux, when you open your Windows Explorer, the the path you're on, that's like the location. So it's exactly the same thing here. Um, the the tilde notation stands for the home directory. Home directory is like, for every user on the computer, that user has his own home directory where he'll save his files. Um, his files, whether they're application files or config files or what have you, like that is the home directory for the user. If we were to say, okay, sorry, my bad. Let me switch over this, yes. Let's echo the home directory for this user. So you can see, when you echo home, it also shows you this. And this home is basically a variable. Um, it's a variable that holds the home directory for the current user. Echo, as the name implies, is just a way of printing out something. So if I were to also do something like echo hello world, okay, I think it's seeing that as, okay, let me, it's seeing the exclamation as if it's something else. So let me just echo hello world without the exclamation. So you see it's printing out hello world. In the next few slides, I'll show you, I will get to actually writing like bash scripts and all that. But just to show you a few more commands, there's echo, there's cd. Um, First of all, let me get the list of all the files and directories in this location. So we have a lot of files. Let's go into hello directory. Cd into hello. So to get into a directory, hello. So if I print working directly, print the directory I'm currently on, you'll see I'm inside root/hello. If I want, I can also list -l. It will give me a list of all the files and directories here, and you can see they're in a particular order. If I want, I can get out of that directory. To go out of that directory and go to the previous directory, I cd into dot dot. Dot dot is a short form for the previous directory, like the parent directory. But before I cd dot dot, let me show you something. ls-al. -a stands for all, so all including hidden files. So you can see there were some hidden files. One of those hidden files was dot, and the other one was dot dot. Basically, dot is current directory. So if I were to say ls, ls roots, it's going to show me what was in the root directory. ls home, ls is this directory, home. Let's see what's the output to this same thing. ls dots, you can see is like the contents of hello. ls dots dots would be the contents of anybody.
The previous directory.
Yes, the parent directory. Yes. So if I cd into dot dot, I'm going back to the parent directory and I can run ls to see all the files here, print working directory to pwd to see the path I'm on, the current location I'm on. So how do we create a file? There are multiple ways of creating a file. The one I use the most is touch touch, and um, let's call it file. So now if I run ls, file should appear. IJK menu key is F. E F G. Yes, look at file. If you notice file wasn't in the previous, you can find file here. After EPEL, the next thing was GCC. So but here you can see file. So now how do I edit the file? Can anybody help me out? Is there a way to edit the file?
Can use
So
Vim.
there are multiple file editors. Yes, there are multiple file editors. If you want to show that you know Linux very well, you use Vim. If you're like me and you don't know Linux well, you use Nano. So which should we use?
D.
Somebody wants me to prove myself. Okay. So you can use Vim. You can use VI as short form for Vim. Um, so let's put a few things here. Let's put OS Linux. Um, So the funny thing about Vim is that when you start Vim, there are a few commands that if you want to edit, you press something. If you want to add a new line, you press something. If you want to delete, you use something else. It's not like your normal text editor that when you open it, you just start typing. So you need to know code. You need to know the code for Vim for you to even use it. So that's the kind of what do you call it, text editor is. VCS Git, um, containers, Docker, um, CI-CD, Jenkins. So now that I finished typing, how do I exit? How do I save and exit?
You escape.
Escape, escape, then
So
colon
in
W2.
yeah, awesome, good. So in Vim, if you finish typing, you press escape. If you notice, there was insert here before, and now, okay, let me just get the insert back. Insert is here, and how I got insert is by pressing I to say that I want to insert. So now that I've finished inserting, I press escape. Then to save, I type column write. So this will write to file system. To exit, I press column Q. It exits. So now, if how can I show the contents of my file? If I don't want to edit it, I just want to show the content. I can use the cat command. So cat file, and if you notice, I started typing FI, then it completed it for me. That's because I pressed tab. Um, how else can I? Okay, so now let's say I want to get the list of get the list of the first everything before the column. How can I do that? So there's a command cut. So cut file. I press tab and completed it for me. -D column. So I want to cut by this symbol one. So you can see it just brought OS, VCS, containers, CI/CD. But if I use cuts again to look at the contents of the file, um, it didn't edit the contents of the file. There are multiple ways to show content of a file. If you have a fat file, you can use something like more. Let me see. Do we have a looking for? Yes. Let's look at more. Okay, this is not a long file. I thought I had a file that was very long. Um, let's do more index.html. So you can see showing me it's actually starting from the beginning of the file and showing me the full and showing me what is on the file based on what can fit into my screen. If I press enter, it shows me the next line. If I press space, it shows me the next set that will fit in my screen. If I'm done, I press Q. Apologies, I need to answer a mobile call. So please tell me if you can see me and hear me and see my mouse moving. Okay,
Yes.
Yeah,
can you
fine.
hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
I
Can
can
you
see your
see my
mouse
mouse
moving.
moving? Okay, good. So we've done enough of demo and with Vim, and we've gone through some commands on the shell, and we know how to access. So time for an exercise. So this is what I want you all to do. So the slides will be shared with you afterwards. So try to complete this exercise. Get a list of all the current users on the system. Sort the list in alphabetical order. Write the list to a file and print out the counts to the terminal. It's not a difficult thing. To give you a hint, there is a file that has the list of all the current users. Just that that file doesn't have just the list of current users. It has the list, it has column, it has some other things. So you've already seen how we use cut to get something. Then there's something called piping, which you can use to chain multiple commands. So if you get that list and you pipe it to another command that sorts, which is called sort, it sorts the list for you. Um, Now to write it to a file, you write it to a file. There are multiple ways of writing to a file. Um, you can also pipe it to a command that writes to a file. Then you can use the last command. Then you can pipe the last thing to a count. I've given the command that you use in counting. So count is actually the command you use to count the number of lines. No, sorry, not count. There's a different command. So I'll leave that out. That you use to get the count of number of outputs. Um, so there are lots of tutorials out there, so just feel free to go and search. And I think you would enjoy doing this exercise. It will give you an idea of how there are several commands in Linux that you can actually use. So let's move on. Let's talk about Linux distros. Linux is like the general name of the operating system. But there are several distributions, called distros for short. Um, and basically, a distribution is just a collection of various applications and utilities that are packaged together with the Linux kernel. So the Linux kernel is like the core thing in the middle, well, around the middle, um, that interfaces with the hardware. So together with the Linux kernel, a distribution, the author of the distribution would um, package a lot of other different applications together with it. And basically they do that to just so there are different use cases someone would have for using Linux. Someone wants to use Linux in an enterprise environment where they just want to deploy their servers. So that's Linux distro will be a different offering from if you were using a Linux distro for just your normal day-to-day computing work. Um, so there are several Linux distros in the background of this slide are a few of the many Linux distros. So there's Alpine. Um, if somebody can point it out, there is Debian, there's Fedora, I can see Red Hat, I can see Raspbian, I can see Ubuntu. So there are so many of them. Open source. Which other one can I identify? Yeah, so there are so many of them. Just I think it's something you can also go and check. But before we move on, let's see. So this this terminal that I was on, this box that I SSHed into, what distro is it? So let's find out. Um, so we use the cat command. We look at the file under etc. And we're looking for a file that starts with asterisk. and we were looking for a file that has releases in it. So there's something, then there's releases. Basically, asterisk there is a wild character to say match anything and everything. So this is a CentOS. You can see CentOS Linux version 7.7. For the other one, this one, what was it? So let's do that again. Cat slash etc slash asterisk release. I think I have one other one. Just bear with me as I open that terminal and try to access that. By the way, if you're using a Windows 10 computer and you don't have access to Linux, you can actually install something called Windows Subsystem for Linux. So just check it out so that you can play around with Linux. And that's what I have here. So let's see, what is this? Cat etc slash asterisk release. So this is something called Alpine Linux. So there's so many distributions, so feel free, go and find out. And some distributions are used for other things, like there's a distribution specifically used for penetration testing called Kali Linux. Alpine is a lightweight Linux, and we use it a lot when we're doing things like creating containers and what have you. Containers will be covered in subsequent sessions of our mentorship program. So let's talk about some apps. Basically, when you're running, so if I come into work and there's something to do on the Linux box, it will most likely be around managing an application. So for what terminal to use? Yeah, let's use this. So in Ubuntu, again, because there are so many several Linux distributions, hold on. Favor, I can see some things happening in the chat. Is there anything I need to respond to? Or someone is already responding to chat?
I think it's fine. Come by.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in Ubuntu, the command you use to run to install an application is apt. So if, for example, if I want to see a list of all installed applications here, so I use the apt command. So it's listing all the it's listed all the things that have been installed. If I were not on Ubuntu, I was on CentOS, use Yum. So Yum is what you use to install applications. You can see all the commands to check for updates, to info list packages. Okay, let's do Yum list the way we did it for Ubuntu. So it's listing. I think this is just listing the repositories and not the okay. Yeah. So it listed the repositories at the beginning, then listed all the applications that I could install from those repositories. But I'm not installing anything now. If I wanted to install, I would use apt install. So for example, like let's say I want to install Nginx. So I'll do something like apt install, then pipe. This is the pipe I was talking about earlier. Then grep for Nginx. So it showed me everything and anything that starts with Nginx. This grep is one of the many other Linux commands that come with Linux distribution. We could install Jenkins, but I think I'll leave that to the call for CI/CD. But basically, this is how you do it. So let's say apt install tab again to complete. Let's say let me install Java. Open JDK, something like that. So there are so many. I press tab and I can see so many. So let's say I'm installing OpenJDK. I'm not actually going to go through the installation. Okay. Why did it fail? It told me unable to acquire lock, permissions denied. Permissions was denied because to install an application on a Linux computer, you have to be the admin. To make yourself admin, you type sudo at the beginning, so sudo apt install. Went and did all that. Do I want to install? No, I don't want to install. Okay. So you can also use apt to update your application apps. Sudo apt updates. So it'll update all the what do you call it applications that are installed. So I don't want it to go through with this. There's a concept called repo, and repo is basically like the app store or the package repository from where you can actually download and install packages. There usually is like the base repo where like the Ubuntu based repo you can see from the URLs here. That's where most of the packages that come with Ubuntu are. But also you can have something like a Google repo from where you can install Kubernetes. You can have a Docker repo that is like managed by Docker from where you can install Docker. And so if we want internally, like let's say in my organization, we could have an internal repo from where we distribute Linux packages from. Um, there's also apt upgrade command to upgrade your applications. You can also uninstall using apt. So there was supposed to be an exercise here. An exercise is how do you install Jenkins on a Linux on a CentOS, and how do you install Linux on Ubuntu? But I think I skipped it and creating the slides. Okay. Yes, then services. So you could have an application like, let's say, so now we have Ubuntu installed. We have an Ubuntu machine and we've installed Jenkins on it. But you want Jenkins to always be running on that machine, and you want it to be running in the background. You don't have to come and like run the command for Jenkins, something like Jenkins start or something like that. You just want to automate it in such a way, in such a way that Jenkins will always be running whenever the computer starts. So there's a concept called services. Basically, services are a set of applications that run in the background and they're always running, waiting to be used. Services are also used to carry out essential tasks. For example, the the networking components of your operating system is a service. Um, if you have something like Nginx running, most likely Nginx will be running as a service. You would have Apache running, and Apache will be running as a service, just waiting for it to be used. So let's see a list of all the services we have running. So yeah, we have a lot of services running on this computer. Um, we have the SSH service running, and only because SSH service was running, that's why we were able to SSH into this box. We have the Docker service running. There's a service I'm looking for, and I can't find it. Okay, but sure, these are the services we have running. So if I was to do to stop a service, so sudo service ssh stop. If I were to do this, then I think this session will also terminate, because the SSH service, the SSH part that's actually handled this handling my connection would be stopped. But let me look for a service. Which service can I can stop Docker. Okay, let's just get the status. So let me get the status of the Bluetooth service. So you can stop a you can stop a service. You can see the service already stopped. You can start a service. You can restart a service. So and you can create the service. How do you create a service? So this service is, we find this service here. So this is the definition of the service. So let me use the more command. Basically, this is, so if you were to write a file like this, and save it in that location, then you'll be able to start whatever is there as a service. So you have the description of the service, documentation, what the start command is, this the exact start command, and what have you. Because at the end of the day, a service just helps you run and manage a particular binary, a particular execution, a particular thing that is running in the background. If I were to install, for example, Nginx on this, if I were to install Nginx on this computer, if I want Nginx to run as a service, all I need to do is just create a file like this and point the start exec command to Nginx. I think we're running out of time. So yeah, your exercise is to, and I don't know why I didn't put this exercise here. Your exercise is to install Nginx on a Linux machine and create a service for it and run the service. Start the service, stop the service, restart the service, and find the status of the service. So let's talk about the file system and the directories. Okay, so earlier I had shown when I did ls. Where am I? Okay, it wasn't on this, but basically this is these are the content of the home directory. Home directory of this user. Yes. So you can see this is the home directory of the user. Because the user is kube user, then he has the directory under home. But what is in the directory? What's in the parent directory of that? Okay, so let's see ls dot. So basically all the users that are in this computer. And what's the parent directory of that? So basically that's the root directory. So let's see the root. So root directory, which is slash, is the first location, like that's the root. Everything is under slash. The root directory is where you find all the file systems. And because Linux, in Linux, everything is either a file or it's a process. So your hardware, the the your hardware are represented as files in Linux, and I'll show you where that is. So let's go from left to right. The bin directory, basically all the commands I can run are here. So let me see which command. So something like env. You can see there's env here, and if I run it, it shows me all the environment variables and what have you. So any command that I can actually run from my terminal would be here. So bin directory holds the essential user binaries. You can see SSH is here, SSH agent is here, and what have you. So I use this clear command to clear the screen. Yes. So the boot, as the name implies, hosts the static boot files. CD-ROM is, again, this is where the thing about where Linux represents everything, even the hardware as files. This is where it comes in. CD-ROM is where your CD drive used to traditionally be mounted. So of course there's no CD drive here, but that directory still exists. Dev is where device files are found. So ls dev. So CD-ROM, console, CPU, where's memory. But basically, everything that is a hardware device is represented as a file inside dev. etc, it's the user configuration directory. So you find the config files there, ls/tc. Yes, so config files for apts, we've seen apt for Docker. You find environment variables, config files for so many other things. You can see config file for SSH. So basically, this is where most of the configuration files are kept for the several applications. The rest of this directory, what they do and what they're supposed to hold. So many of them. The last thing I wanted to talk about, with last two things, is bash scripting. And I'll try to make this quick. So back to my, okay. So remember, there are a lot of commands there are a lot of commands that you can run on Linux. However, if you want to automate some tasks, some activities, you can actually put all those commands together in a file, and that's what we refer to as bash scripting. There are lots of tutorials, but let me just give you a simple example. So let's say we want to, let's say we want to assign a string to a variable and print that string. Um, Yes. So we can assign that. So this is me typing it on the command line, but I could as well just put it in a file and run that file. And I've done that. So let me just show you. cd into Linux DevOps ng. So I have a test.sh. So what's inside test.sh? Let's cut it. So you can see it's basically the same thing. Declaring a string, declaring a variable, and using that variable. So let's execute it. How do you execute it? You use the sh command. Sh is just stands for shell. So you're using sh, which is the shell, to execute a file. So you can see hello world was printed. If we were to, so I've connected this terminal with my Visual Studio Code so that I can easily edit things. So if we were to come here and edit this and make it hello-world, and I come here and I run that, you can see it's hello-world. There are so many other commands you can run. I have a few here, so let me just pick the last one. Code test2.sh. Just create a file. I could use Vim, but since I have this nice UI code, Visual Studio Code, why not use it? Save it. And so you see, what does it do? It creates a global variable, then it comes into a function from any programming language, and assigns a different value to a variable, creates a local variable and assigns a different value, then prints it inside that function, then come out, print it outside that function. So let's see what happens. So if we were to run sh tests test2.sh, something is wrong with the command. Let me not spend time troubleshooting that. Something is wrong. I need to come and look at it. I don't know why I didn't run here today. But yeah, you can do a lot with batch scripting. You can do a multi-loop. One example that that was fun and interesting is this. So I'll just paste the. So it will continue to loop forever and print the dates. You can see while true, echo this and sleep for 1 second. So it will continue until you exit it. Basically, that's what it does. So there's so much you can do with it. If you've ever installed something on Linux and they give you a command, run something.sh, they give you a URL, download this file and run it. Usually in that file is just a collection of different bash scripts. And because you can pipe multiple outputs, you can change commands using pipe, then you can do a lot with bash scripting. Hold on. Yes, so something that we often do is also network troubleshooting. I resumed today at work and I'm told that, for example, yes, our servers can't reach the internet. What should I do? So the first thing is look for an IP on the internet. So let me ping 4.4.4.4. So there's no access to 4.4.4.4. So let me just change terminals and make sure that I'm okay. Let's ping something more local. Let me see 172.20. No, no. 19. What can I ping? Let me get an IP on the internet. I was looking for a public IP. Just ping. Okay. So ping 8.8.8.8. These are Google servers that help with DNS resolution. Um, Interesting. I can't reach that. What if I were to do a curl to Google www.google.com as usual? I also can't reach that. So it means that you can actually see that there's no network connectivity from this box to that. So let's try it on a different. So ping. It seems like it's the same story. Curl www.google.com. So, but with curl, I can actually reach it. So for some reason, I can reach that IP. But let's say I want to know what is the IP behind google.com. How do I do that? There's a smart command ns look up. So instead of just typing interesting. NS lookup doesn't exist on that time now. I think NS lookup should exist here. NS lookup www. That's so you can see this is the IP for Google. So that means whenever whenever you try to get this, it resolves to this. Um, thing isn't working. So let's say you've tried ping and it worked. You want to see the IP configurations of your box. I mean, I'll use this. Ifconfig. So you can see all the configurations, all the network configurations for your box, and you can see the actual IP address for your terminal. You can also use dig to do a DNS lookup. Telnet is something you use, and I wish I could show you Telnet. Yeah, but check up on Telnet. Telnet is a very useful tool to check if you can actually reach from one location, you can reach another box to a particular port, because when you're doing networking, you're not just trying to reach the box on the IP, you're also trying to reach an application running the box, which will be assigned a port. The last one I want to show you was that yes. It gives me net stats. Net stats with some flags. So let's go TLPN. We'll show you everything that is running and listening on that computer. So let me run this on this terminal and we'll see. Yes. So these are all the processes that are listening on a particular port. So you can see the process called hoverfly is listening on this port. The process called postman is listening on this port, and SSH usually listens on port 22. And you can even see that there is a connection to this particular server from this other computer. It's connecting to SSH on port 22, but the port of that other computer is this, and you can actually see the command that was used to run it. So this is very useful. For example, if someone was to come and say that I have my SQL on this computer and it's running, but I cannot reach it from my own computer. All you need to do is just run netstat and check and see if my SQL is actually running and the port is there. I think that is all for me. Yeah, so let's have some question and answers. Thank you very much. Sorry, was I sharing my screen?
Yes, you were. Thank you. Just share your screen.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Abdulbasit.
So I need to, yes. Favor, I will need to run in 5 minutes.
All right. So let's just take 2 questions to allow Abdulbasit to attend to other things. So just 2 questions.
Any questions? So there's so much more to learn in Linux, but this is just like the basics. I just gave an overview of what I would most likely be doing on day one if I were to work as a DevOps engineer and I need to manage a few things. So I might come in, install some applications. I might run the application as a service. And if anybody complains that they can't reach the application or there's a connectivity issue, I would debug that and just troubleshoot that. Any questions? Okay, if you don't have any question for the content of this presentation, just ask any question. Feel free to ask any other question. Let me know that I wasn't talking to myself or I wasn't boring.
So
Thanks
do
for
we
the
get the
presentation. So I have a question as regards networking part. Um,
Okay.
so what are the most commonly used commands or commands when it comes to networking that DevOps do use regularly?
So those were the ones I did ping to see if you can reach a box, and if you can reach that box, you use telnet to find out if you can reach the service running on that box on that on the remote machine. Curl to see if you can actually reach a or to actually like make a HTTP call or HTTPS call. So just to see if maybe someone tells you I have a web server running, so you can use curl to see if that web server is actually running. Use netstat to see a list of the things that are running on your computer, and what else? Yeah, so those are a few. There are lots more, and it depends on your use case. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, I have one.
Okay, you can go on, please.
Okay. So is it better to use Nano or Vim? Because I usually have issues with Vim. And you mentioned that Vim has its own commands. Does Nano has its own commands? Which one would you advise if you are using an Ubuntu to work with?
It's up to you. Funny story. I didn't used to use Vim until I joined InterSwitch. Where I was working before then, I always used Nano, which was much simpler. Why should I go and struggle with Vim? And I didn't know how to use Vim. Then I joined InterSwitch. Then the boxes that I was working on were CentOS, and they didn't have Nano. So what did I do? I learned Vim, and now I can use Vim. So it's up to you. It's your choice. If you don't even want Vim, you don't want Nano, you can go and install something else.
Okay, thank you.
That's not a bad skill to have. Like, if you go and learn Vim, it's not a bad thing. it has its own advantages.
All right, thank you so much, Abdulbasit. So I think that will be it. I guess I don't know if you assigned probably tasks to the mentees just to test their knowledge of what we did today.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I said I don't know if you assigned a task to the mentees to test the knowledge of what we did today.
So there was a task on on the slides.
Okay.
Maybe I think I can, and I mentioned some verbally. So maybe I can just put those put those down and send it to you so that you can share with them.
All right, I'll appreciate that. So I'll get it across to the mentees if you share that with me. Okay, so thank you so much, Abdulbasit, and thank you so much for everyone that joined so far. Yeah, so that will be it for this class.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.